Okay, so welcome to another discussion in our subject. For today, we're going to talk about cost volume profit relationships. Okay, so let's start with the basic concepts. No, in cost volume profit analysis, we compute for the net income. No, most of the time we compute the net income using the behavioral approach. Now, when you say behavioral approach, okay, this is also known as the contribution margin approach. Why is it called behavioral approach? Well, number one, because your costs are presented or grouped according to their behavior. Okay, not like your traditional, which is also known as functional approach. Costs are presented according to their function. Okay, that's also known as your gap, okay, method of computing your net income. Anyway, this is behavioral approach or contribution margin approach. Why is it called contribution margin approach? Because, okay, there is emphasis in the contribution margin. Let's try to change the color of the pen. Na tayo nito. Ayan. Okay, so what is this contribution margin? This is actually your first line of defense. As long as your contribution margin is positive, okay, there's a chance, no, that you will have a net income, no, especially if you're operating above the break-even point. Now, if your contribution margin is zero or negative, kahit anong gawin mo, you will never have net income. Okay, so that's why it's called the first line of defense. Okay, what else? This is the difference of sales less variable cost. That's the easiest and most popular definition of contribution margin. Okay, and this one is also the amount that you will use to recover your fixed cost, no? And any excess of the contribution margin above your fixed cost will be contributed to your net income. Ayan, so dyan nanggagaling yung net income mo. So imagine if this is zero or negative, you will have no amount to recover your fixed cost. You will never have net income. Okay, so ayun. What else can we get from this? Since you already know the behavior of your revenue and your cost, we can actually compute for the per unit, kunyari maganda yung sulat ko, per unit information. So if this is your sales at 500, you can compute for your selling price per unit at 250 divided by 500, that will now be 500 pesos. Also, you can compute for your variable cost per unit, which is 150 divided by 500, you will get 300 pesos. And the difference of these two is known as the contribution margin per unit naman. This is contribution margin in total. This is now your contribution margin per unit, which is, in this case, 200 pesos. Okay, so ayan. Na-define na natin kanina what's your contribution margin, no? Your contribution margin per unit naman is the amount that will be contributed to your net income every time you sell a unit above your break-even point. Okay? So, bakit ganun? Now, if you go back to our previous discussions on cost, lalo na sa cost accounting, no? Pinag-aralan natin yan, yung behavior ng cost in relation to your revenue. If this is, for example, your fixed cost, okay? Bakit ayaw? Balik na tayo. Ayan. If this is, for example, your total fixed cost, and then you add on top of that your variable cost, total variable cost, you will have here your total cost. Okay, and kunyari this is your total revenue, this is now your break-even point, the point where your total revenue is equal to your total cost. This is your break-even point in quantity, while this one is your break-even point in sales. Okay, so ayan, this is your lost area. Why? Because your total cost is higher than your total revenue. And this one is your profit area because your total revenue is higher than your total cost. So let's go back, no, dito sa definition. Your contribution margin per unit is the amount, no, that your net income will increase. Ganun na lang, mas madali. Your net income will increase every time a unit is sold above the break-even point. Okay, so let's go back to that later. Let's talk about break-even point muna. What is your break-even point? Okay, so let's try to summarize. Your break-even point in quantity or in sales, sabi natin kanina, okay, is actually a point where your total revenue is equal to your total cost. When total revenue is equal to your total cost, we expect that your profit will be equal to 0. Okay? Now, if you try to look at this income statement, if my profit is 0, then at any point, alam natin, our fixed cost is constant, at any point. Then it also means that my contribution margin at break-even point, let's write that down. At break-even point is also 80 dapat. Tama? So we can say that your total fixed cost will be equal to your contribution margin. Also, if that's the case, then at break-even point, your fixed cost ratio will be equal to your contribution margin ratio. Ayan. So, what is this ratio? Ganito yan. You can actually compute for the contribution margin ratio using the per unit, information. Ganun na lang. Okay, so paano ba yan? If this one is 100%, okay, 300 divided by 500, that will be 60%. This one will be 40%. That's 200 divided by 500. And as long as there are no changes in your selling price per unit and your variable cost at any level of operation, this should be constant per unit or in total. So let's try to check, in total, if this one is 100%, your sales, 150 divided by 250, you will get 60%. This one will be 40%. 100 divided by 250. So you see, pareho siya. Okay. Which means, going back to our analysis, if we are at break-even point and your net income is 0%, then this should also be 40%. O di andali na pala, okay? By working back, you can simply compute for your break-even sales, and that is by dividing 80,000 by 40%. So what is 80,000 divided by 40%? That will now be 200,000. And 200,000 pesos. Okay po. Now to check if that is correct, what is 60% of 200? That is 120,000. So, ayan. Tama yung pag-analyze natin. Ayan, balikan natin. This is how much your net income will increase every time you sell above the break-even point. What is our break-even point? Okay, in sales, it's 200,000 pesos. What about in quantity? Your break-even quantity will now be, what's the easiest way? Okay, since you already have your sales, you simply divide that by your selling price per unit. Okay, so, analysis lang, di ba? Basic. 200,000 divided by 50,000, you will get 400 units. Okay, so that's your break-even point in units. And this one is your break-even point in sales. So, balikan natin, if this is your break-even point, and let's say you were able to sell, so you sold 401 units. There you go, 401 units. How much will be your net income? Your net income will be 200 pesos. Right? Contribution margin per unit. If you were able to sell, let's say, 402 units, how much will be your net income at 402 units? Okay, net income will now be equal to 400 pesos. O di yan, dali-dali na lang pala, di ba? Now, it's different if the question is, how much will be the increase in your net income if you were able to sell the 401st unit. The increase in the net income will be 200 pesos. Now, how much will be the increase in your net income if you were able to sell the 402nd unit? Okay, kunyari may sumagot. Okay, the answer will still be 200. Sir, bakit 200? Kasi 402nd unit, 401st unit. 1 unit lang and each unit will contribute 200. Hindi gaya dito, it's asking for your total net income, no? 401 units, 402 units, this will now be your net income. Okay po, total net income dito, increase in net income lang. Okay, now if you try to put things together, o di parang may shortcut ka na. It's so easy to compute for your net income, no? Like, for example, kunyari, hindi natin alam itong data na to. No? You want to compute for your net income at 500 units, okay? How will you compute your net income? 500 units, this is 100 units above the break-even point of 400, diba? So, you simply multiply 100 units times 200 pesos per unit. And you will have a net income of 20,000 pesos. O, nasundan po. Ano po ito? This is your contribution margin per unit. And this one will be 400 minus, oh no, I'm sorry, it's not 400 minus 500, it's the opposite. Okay, burahin natin. This one is 500 units minus, and minus 400 units. The number of units you're selling above the break-even point. O, di ba? Nasundan na. Ayan, o isa pa. Kunyari, at 600 units, how much is your net income? This is how many units above break-even point. 600 minus 400, you will have 200 units above the break-even point times the contribution margin per unit. Okay, and you will get 4. There you go, 40,000 pesos. Okay, so ayan na, 40,000 pesos. Ano pa ba yung mga kailangan ninyong malaman dito? Pwede ka ring mag-work back. Paano? Okay, dito, given the number of units, how much is your net income? What if, okay, given the net income, how many units do you have to sell? Oh, wala munang formula. Okay, o wala munang graph. Okay, all you have to do is to analyze the relationship, di ba? So, if your target net income, dito na lang tayo. If I want a net income, gamitin natin to, kunyari hindi natin alam yan. If I want a net income of 20,000, this means that, number one, if you have a net income, you're already operating above the break-even point. Nasa profit area ka na. Which means you're selling units above the break-even point in units. O di, ano na lang yung gagawin mo doon? Okay? Ang gagawin mo dito, you simply divide the net income by the contribution margin per unit, which is in this case 200. And what do you get? 20,000 divided by 200, you will get 100 units. Okay, is this the answer? No. Okay, this is just the number of units above the break-even point. So you still have to add 400 units. Bakit ayaw na? 400 units, okay? And you will get a total of 500 units. Okay. There you go. Okay. Now, let's do the same if your target net income is, ano kaya? You want a net income amounting to 30,000. Okay, if this is my target net income, I'm already selling above the break-even point, no? I just have to divide this by 200, the contribution margin, no, per unit, and you will get, magkano po ito? 150 units. Okay, above the break-even point. Therefore, you still have to add 400 units. Okay, and you will get 550 units. Ayun. You need to sell 550 units, okay, so that you can have a net income or a target net income of 30,000 pesos. Okay, so I guess that's it. Okay. Ano pa ba yung mga kailangan nating malaman dito? Let's try to erase this. And then let's continue. Okay. Now let's talk about the graph. Na-discuss na natin kanina yung graph. Okay, pero ulitin lang natin. Okay, ano ba yung graph kasi na yan? Now, one of the most important assumptions used in CVP is that the behavior of your costs are linear in nature. Ibig sabihin nito, okay, you have y is equal to a plus bx. Okay, pagdating sa cost function na linear, this is the same as your total cost is equal to your, A is your fixed cost, total fixed cost, because that's your constant, diba? Plus V, which is your slope, that's now your variable cost per unit. Okay? You multiply that by X, your independent variable, that is actually your quantity. This is now your total, total variable cost plus total fixed cost equals your total cost. Ayan. Drawing lang natin ulit. Okay, that's your fixed cost, no? Total fixed cost. Dapat dito mag-uumpisa pag variable cost, but since we would like to show the total cost, that's your total cost. Ito ngayon yung total variable cost natin. That's now your total revenue. This is your break-even point, okay? This is your break-even point in quantity. Okay, boring na to. Ilang beses nyo nang nakita ito. That's your break-even point in sales. Okay, so this now is your loss area. Why loss area? Because your total cost is higher than total revenue. And this one is your profit area because your total revenue is higher than your total cost. Okay po. So, ayun lang. May alternative method ito. Okay, alternative approach. I've seen in one of the old CMA books, no. If this is your total cost, this one is the fixed cost, and this one is the variable cost. Okay, so ayun lang naman. Anyway, let's talk about this. Now, let's talk about this formula. So if you now have that formula for total cost, okay, we can already integrate your revenue to come up with the basic operating equation. So how do you do that? Paano ba? Normally you have your sales. This one is the easiest, no? Your sales is equal to your total fixed cost plus your total variable cost. Siya yun, actually, this is your total variable cost. Ayan. Plus your profit. And there are different ways on how you can simplify this, no? For example, you want to simplify this, and kasi sa CVP, no, cost volume profit relationship, you want to simplify this to emphasize the effect of quantity of volume, no? Okay, so paano yun? Your sales will be selling price per unit, you multiply that by your quantity, and then you have your total fixed cost. plus, okay, your variable cost per unit, multiply that by your quantity plus your profit. Of course, if we're talking about the break-even point, you simply equate your profit to 0, di ba? And you have your break-even equation na. Okay, pero sige, dito muna tayo. You can simplify this further by combining this, no, variable cost per unit times quantity, and this one, magiging selling price per unit. Ayan. Sige, ganyan natin times quantity, and then lipat natin sa kabila, minus variable cost per unit, okay, times your quantity, is equal now to your total fixed cost plus your profit. This one, you can simplify this further, no? You have your selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit equals your quantity. Times your quantity equals total fixed cost plus your profit. Okay. And ito, looks familiar, di ba? What is selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit? This is actually your contribution margin per unit. Tama po? You multiply that by your quantity and you will get your total fixed cost plus your profit. Okay? Now, if you want to isolate Q, the quantity, kasi yan nga yung objective natin, di ba? Okay, your quantity now, pwede ba tayo dito? Your quantity is equal to your total fixed cost plus your profit. Divide this by contribution margin per unit. Okay, so kung ito yung hinahanap natin, okay, yung quantity, then this is now your formula. And then from this formula, if you equate your profit into 0, you can now compute for the break-even quantity, which is your total fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Okay po. Sir, bakit total fixed cost? Yun yung lumabas dyan eh. But then if you try to look at the relationship, okay, di ba at break-even quantity, your total fixed cost is equal to your total contribution margin. Okay, so in effect, you're actually dividing your total contribution margin with the contribution margin per unit. So you will get the quantity at break-even point. Ayan, so yan, dami application yan. Like for example, how many units are you going to sell if you have a target profit of like this, di ba? Or yan, what will be the units you have to sell, no? So that you can break even. Equate po lang yan sa 0 and you will now have this formula. Ayun. Screenshot. Okay, so dyan pala nanggaling yung formula ng break-even quantity. There's another way to simplify this. Let's try to attempt to simplify that using ratios naman. Paano na ba yun? Sulat muna natin. You have here your sales. You have here your sales. That will be equal to your total fixed cost plus your total variable cost plus your profit. Ngayon, in terms of percentage, diba? This one, no? These are your components of your sales. Sa FS analysis, kapag intra-period or cross-sectional ka, parang common size financial statements, your total revenues will be divided to your different costs at yung may iwan pupunta sa profit. Ganon din po dito. So, parang may 100% yun. Yung sales na yan. And these ones, no, are percentages of sales. Now, let's try to focus on your total variable cost. Kasi, we have discussed earlier that at any level, no, at any level of operation, your contribution margin ratio should be constant. Maybe we can go back to that slide. Ayan, your contribution margin ratio will be constant. Per unit, it's 40%. In total, it's 40%. This is also true for variable cost. Per unit, it's 60%. In total, it's 60%. So, anong gagawin natin? Okay. Kukunin ngayon natin yan. Let's try to express this as a percentage of sales. So, this one is total fixed cost plus, ayan, variable cost ratio. You multiply that by your sales. Tama ba? And you will get your profit. Okay, sana po nasundan yun. Now, we can combine this, no? Para bang 100% sales. Sales minus, let's try to erase this part. Where's my eraser? Ayan, minus your variable cost ratio times your sales will be equal to your total fixed cost plus your profit. Okay, kunyari nag-enjoy pa tayo. So, if you have 100 minus variable cost, yes, 100 minus variable cost ratio times your sales. Ano, familiar na ba to? Parang nakita na ninyo siya. There you go. Di ba 100% minus your variable cost ratio? This is also known, na-compute na natin to kanina, your contribution margin ratio. Ayan, you multiply that with your sales and you will get your total fixed cost plus your profit. Ayun. Now, if you want to isolate sales. Ayan, yung revenue naman kasi cost, volume, profit. Dapat cost, volume, profit, revenue relationship. Ganun, di ba? Pero, anyway, you can have sales, just to simplify, is equal to your total fixed cost plus your profit. Lipat natin sa kabila and that will now be divided by contribution margin ratio. So, ayan na. Diba? At a given level of profit, magkano kaya yung sales ko? You can use this formula. And from that formula, you can now come up with the break-even sales. You simply equate your profit into 0 and you will get total fixed cost divided by contribution margin ratio. Diba? Ayun. So, if you try to put things together from our earlier discussion, diba at break-even point, your fixed cost is the same as contribution margin in total. So, this is, in substance, dividing your contribution margin by the contribution margin ratio to get 100% or your sales. Okay po. So, ano pa ba yung mga kailangan nating malaman dito? Ayan. Now, sige. Kanina, we have this formula. Quantity can be computed by total fixed cost plus your profit divided by your contribution margin per unit. Now, this one is your profit before tax. What if your target profit is your profit after deducting tax? So, ito ay, anong gagawin? I-gross up mo lang yun, no? This one is before tax, lagay natin. Before deducting tax. But if you're looking for profit after tax, okay, the formula will be quantity is equal to total fixed cost plus yung na-gross up na profit is still contribution margin divided by contribution margin per unit. You see the pattern here? Ang mangyayari lang dito, it will be profit after tax. Profit after tax, okay, divide this by 100% minus your tax rate, okay? And that concept is also applicable, no, if we are using your sales. Now, earlier, you have your sales equal to your total fixed cost plus your profit Okay, and divide this by your contribution margin ratio. This one is before tax, your profit before deducting tax. Okay, now what if the target profit is profit after deducting tax? So by applying this approach, your sales or target sales is now equal to your total fixed cost divided by contribution margin percentage. Napansin niyo ba, per unit yan if we're looking for the quantity. Pero pag sales, it's always in terms of percentage. So those are the patterns that you have to take note of. Anyway, we are going to gross up your profit after tax. Profit after tax divided by 100% minus your tax rate. Okay, so ang saya-saya. Ayan. Ano pa ba yung mga kailangan ninyong malaman dito? You can also have alam ko na. What if pala? What if? Let's have some examples. Okay. Some short drills lang. Let's go back to the earlier data. Our sales, take note, at 500 units, at 500 units, our sales is 250,000 pesos, less the variable cost, which is 150. That's 300 times 500, and then you will get contribution margin at 200, and then you will have your fixed cost. Ay, bakit 200? Wait lang, pahiya na naman ako. Ayun. And then you will have your fixed cost at 80. Okay, kunyari hindi ako inaantok, we now have a net income of 20,000 pesos. That's the original example, Now, here's a question, galing dun sa PowerPoint presentation na binigay ko sa inyo from Gitman. His question is, what will be the profit impact if this company can increase its unit sales from 500 units now at 540? What will happen if your units will increase from 500 to 540? How? By increasing the monthly advertising budget by 10,000. Okay, so by increasing the monthly advertising budget by 10,000. So what's that? Budget as to fixed cost. So this one will increase by 10,000. This will now become 90,000 pesos. This one is very easy. You just have to compute. Since your selling price is not affected, okay, selling price earlier was 500. This one is 300, and this one is 200. Ayan. So, you have 500. Lagyan natin yan pesos para hindi kayo malito. You now have 500 pesos, the selling price, times 540. How much is the sales? This one will be 270,000. Ayan. Okay. And 300 times 540, that will be 162. Na-compute na to in advance. Okay, so 270 minus 162, that will be 108. Minus 90, you will have 18. Okay, why am I showing you this? Take note, it's asking for the profit impact. Ayan, so if that's the case, ang common error dito, the student will answer, Sir, 18,000. Okay, 18,000 is the profit, but the impact will be a decrease, There's going to be a decrease in net income by 2,000 pesos. Ayun. Okay, kung gusto mo, i-shortcut mo na. Since there's no change in the selling price and variable cost, you can use this immediately, no? 200 times 540, okay, you will have 108. Okay, minus 90, you will have 18. May shortcut pa dyan using the incremental approach, no? You can just go directly to 40, gaya ng ginagawa natin kanina. So, you just multiply 40 times 200 and you will get 8,000, the increase in contribution margin. Okay, so the increase in contribution margin of 8,000 coming from 200 pesos times 40 units. Okay, and you compare that with the increase in your fixed cost, which is 10. You will now have, kasi minus yan, you will now have a decrease of 2,000 pesos. Okay po? So that is an example when, no, that's an example when your fixed cost was changed. Yan yung effect niya sa net income. Now, sir, hindi ba mas maganda gamitin palagi ito? For me, it depends, no? Me, I prefer, although this is tempting kasi shortcut na shortcut. But for me, I prefer to use the long method kasi mas safe. Kitang-kita mo siya pag may error ka. Parang Rexona, it won't let you down. Okay, so there's another question. What if, no? What if the question is, this company was able to use a higher quality raw materials, thus increasing variable cost naman. So the variable cost per unit increased by 10, okay? And then the sales increased, no, to 580. Okay, so let's try to compute that. Dito na lang, pagkasyahin natin. How much is your sales? That's going to be 500 pesos. It's still the same. 500 pesos times 580. Okay, so you will have 290,000. Paano nakuha yun? That's 580 units times 500 pesos na selling price per unit. And then look at this. Your variable cost now will be 580 units times 310 per unit. Okay, so bakit ganun? Because initially it's 300, it was increased by 10 pesos, so you now have 310. That will now be 179,800. Sana nasusundan nyo. You will get your contribution margin, which is 110,200 less your fixed cost already given at 80. Okay, syempre yung original, no? You will now have 30,200. Okay, so how much is the profit? It's 30,200. But how much is the impact? There is a change in the net income. Actually, it is an increase, no? By 30,200 minus 20,000, you will now have 10,200 as your increase in the net income. So, those are just the common questions, no? Ano pa? Kunyari, what if there is a change, no? There is a change in the selling price. So, sabi ng problem, the company cuts its selling price by 20 per unit. So, selling price was decreased by 20 per unit and then increases its advertising budget by 15,000, and it will result to an increase in the quantity, no, to 650. So what is now the profit impact? Let's compute. You have here your sales. We will be selling at 650 units, but this time the selling price per unit is decreased by 20. So 500 minus 20, that will be 580. Okay, so 480. So 480 times, kano yun? 650. Sulat na natin. 480 times 650. Wala na yung solution ko. Punta nga tayo dito. Asan na? Ayan. 500 minus 20, that's 480. Multiply that by 608. No, 650 pala. Tara! It's now 312. Okay. Alt tab. Bakit oyo? You now have 312. And your variable cost, that will be 650 times 3. Oops. Times 3. 300. Okay. Dapat pala sinolve ko na rin ito. 300 times 650. Nawala ko yung kodigo ko eh. It's 195. 195. Now you have your variable, no? Contribution margin. The difference, 5, 12, 117, 117. Okay, less our fixed cost, which is, oops, don't forget, increased by 15. So you have 80,000 plus 15,000. You now have 90. How much is the net income? 90, 10, 17, 20. Wait. Tama, 22. Hindi, 15 kasi 95. Sabi ko na may mali. Ito ay 22 na siya. 22,000 pesos. So there is an increase in the net income by 2,000 pesos. Okay. Another example is when there is ano na to? Dito tayo. There is a change in cost structure. Ayun, yun pala. I was looking for that. There's a change in cost structure. Kanina kasi ang dali eh. Change in selling price, change in variable cost, change in fixed cost and in units. Pero this time, cost structure. Paano ba to isi-simplify? Cost structure. Out of your total cost, mati yan sa dalawa. You have here your fixed cost and your variable cost, and you have here your fixed cost. When we say change in cost structure, okay, one cost will increase while the other one will decrease. Why? Because a shift, no? There may be a shift in the behavior of your cost. Ang favorite na example ko dito is your sales cost, no? Which will be our next example. Kunyari, yung salaries. Fixed salary. No? You have a fixed salary. This time, so nasa fixed cost yan. No? If the management will decide na, instead of giving you a fixed salary of 30,000, we'll just give you a fixed salary of 20. So this will be reduced. But, okay, we will be giving you a commission of this much. Sometimes they do that, no? Number one, to motivate manpower para mas magsipag pa sila sa pagbebenta, or yun yung sasabihin nila sa'yo, okay, para maging mas masipag kayo. Okay, we will be increasing the potential, no? We will be giving the potential to increase your salaries by giving you a higher commission. But, okay, we are going to reduce your fixed salary. Masarap pakinggan, ano? Actually, that's what they will tell you, but sometimes it's just a strategy to manipulate your fixed cost, because your fixed cost has something to do with leverage. Now, this was already discussed earlier in our financial statement analysis. No, yung concept ng leverage under solvency. So you might want to review that. But later on, we'll have another discussion. Okay, but we'll just focus on the degree of operating leverage. As of this point, I just want to say na, well, the higher the fixed cost, the higher the leverage. And if leverage is high, a small change in the revenue will result to a higher change in our net income. Kaya gusto mo highly leverage yun. Okay, so kaya gusto mo na mataas na fixed cost. And sometimes yun. Variable cost, dadalhin nila sa fixed cost. And this is good, no? This is good if you expect your sales to go up. Diba? Para konting increase lang sa sales, mas malaki yung increase sa net income. But you don't want that to happen okay, if your sales are going down. So if you expect your sales to go down, you have to decrease your leverage. Okay? And how do you do that? By decreasing your fixed cost. So some of your fixed cost will be transferred to your variable cost. Mag-post muna kayo ng video, no? Have a short moment for you to internalize that portion. Anyway, let's continue. Sabi ng problem, what if this company pays, okay, 15 pesos, ayan, commission, sales commission for every unit sold instead of, okay, versus, okay, instead of 6,000 per month. This one is fixed cost. This one is variable cost. Okay, so instead of this, it will now become a variable cost. And because of that, no, the sales people will want to sell more. Kundi tataas ngayon yung sales nila. And sabi ng problem, they will be selling, no, from 500, this will be increased to 575. Ayan. So, let's try to compute. Kung pwede nga, mag-pause muna kayo ng video para bago nyo makita yung solution. So that you can compare. Ayan, para malaman nyo kung nakakasunod kayo. Ayan, kunyari nag-pause ka na, kinompute mo, ngayon gusto mo na lang siyang i-compare. Okay. Asa pa ako, di ba? Ayan, so let's compute. You have 575 times, is there a change in the selling price? Wala. So, that will still be 500. Okay. So, 500 times 575, that will be, wala talaga yung aking kodigo. So, 575 times, kunyari magkatabi tayo. Ayan. At tinututoran kita. Ayan, ganito yan adding, ha? Ganon. 287 500. And then let's compute your variable cost. That's 575 times, okay, what will happen from 300, it will now become 515. Tama? So we're going to add 15. And so 315. Let's try to compute that. 575 times 315. Tara! It's 181,125. 181,125. Contribution margin will be 500, 125. This one will be 375, 601, 106. Okay, fixed cost of, oops, hindi na siya 80 kasi from 6 naging 15, nabawasan siya ng 6. Lagay natin dito 80,000 minus 6. Mga common errors natin, no? Tada! This will now be 74,000. So that's 375, 106, 74, 26 plus 6, 32. Alright, so that is now your net income. If the question is, how much is the net income? This will be your answer. How much is the profit impact or change? Okay, that will be minus 20,000 and your answer will be increased by 12,375. Okay po. So, ayun. Other examples, okay, what if this is used in decision making? Like for example, in pricing. Sabi ng problem, what if you have the opportunity to sell? Ayan. So you have the opportunity to sell 150 bikes or units. Ayan. bikes kasi yung example niya dito. Ayan. To a wholesaler without disturbing sales to other customers or fixed expenses. Ano ibig sabihin nun? You can sell 150 units without disturbing sales to other customers. This means that even if someone will buy 150 units from you, you can still sell your normal sales to your customers. Hindi mababawasan. Kumbaga, you have enough capacity to cover these extra sales. Ayan. So, the question now is, what will be the selling price, okay, so that your net income will increase by 3,000. Ayan, i-pause mo muna. Okay, from the old operation. Someone is going to buy 150 bultuhan. Kaya wholesale. O ako, bilis sa'yo 150 units. Okay, magkano bigay mo sa akin? Ako, gusto tawad. Okay, what's the normal selling price? It's 500. Okay, but this one is buying at 150. So, what will now be your lowest selling price? Yun na lang. If you want to have an increase in the profit of 3,000. Okay. Kunyari, sabi nito, benta mo akin 450 pesos per unit na lang. Eh, papayag ka ba at 450? I-pause mo muna yung video, saka mo siya i-compute. Kunyari, nag-pause ka na at i-compute mo na siya. Okay? So, paano ba natin ito itatakal? Okay. Saan tayo mag-uumpisa? If this is the given, you want to increase your net income by 3,000, dito siya manggaling, di ba? So, you can actually compute, no? You can divide 3,000 increase in your income divided by 150 units, and you will have an estimate of a profit of 20 per unit. Okay. And since you are already operating above the break-even point, it means that you already recovered your fixed cost. So at this level of operation, what you're going to recover for every bike that you sell will be your variable cost. Okay, so what is the variable cost per unit? It's 300. Babawiin mo yan, di ba? You cannot sell it at 20 because that's just for the profit. You cannot sell it at 300 kasi wala ka ng profit. Therefore, your answer will be at least 320. O payag na ikaw, bilhin ko at 450 per unit. Oo na. Because 450 is more than 320. You need to sell that at least 320 so that your profit will increase by at least 3,000. Now, if you want to check, you have 150 units, you multiply that by 320, 48 yata ito I-recompute pa rin natin para makasigurado. 320 times 150, 48, yes, 48,000 pesos. And what is the cost, What is the cost? The variable cost is 150 times 300. That will be 45. A difference of 3,000. Ayan. Okay po ba? This will be your increase in contribution margin, which is also the increase in the net income. Sir, palagi bang ganyan? The increase in the contribution margin is the same as the increase in the net income? The answer is yes, if you are operating above the break-even point, wherein your fixed cost is already recovered. Okay po ba? Actually, at any point naman, kaya nga lang pag nag-negative, tama. Okay. Pwede nga, Pwede. Okay po. So, ayun. What else do you need? Okay? Let's try to have another example. Ako naman. Okay, so this one is my favorite example. What if you have the following? The usual sales at 500 units, 500 pesos per unit. Let's just review. Nasa na ba yung notes ko? Parang nalista ko yun. Ayun. Okay, so you have your sales, you have your variable cost at 150. Contribution margin at 100. Fixed cost at 80. O, eto. Challenge, no? Net income is 20,000. First question. Ayan. How many, ano bang maganda dito? Ayan. How many units am I going to sell if I want a net income of 10% of sales? And my net income is before tax. Mako-compute nyo ba to? Okay, i-pause nyo nga muna yung video saka nyo siya i-compute. Ayan. Kunyari, pinost mo yung video tas kinompute mo. Kunyari lang naman. Libre naman ang umasa. Ayan. So, kunyari, ginawa mo yon. Let's try to see if your answer is correct. Okay? Before tax, no? I want to have a net income which is 10% of sales. So, ibig sabihin, this one will be 100%. Diba? Ito, 60%. It follows. This one is 40%. 40, 10%. Automatic. This one is 30%. Okay. So, we're almost done. No? You just have to work back. Your sales now will be equal to 80,000 divide by 30%. Okay, so let's try to do that. 80,000 oops, divided by 0.3. You will now have 266 pesos. That's now your sales for a target net income of 20% of your sales. Medyo mali, ano? Dapat ang question is, how much should be your quantity sold so that you will have at least a net income of 10% of sales. Bakit may mali? Take note, we are selling at 500 pesos per unit. Okay, so diba, at 500 pesos per unit, you cannot have this. It's either 266,500 or 267,000. Diba? Kaya, ayan. Although mathematically this is correct, no? And then you can now compute. Quantity will now be equal to 666.67 divided by 500 pesos per unit. And you will have the quantity of divided by 500. 533.33 units. Sir, wala po siya sa choices. Very good. Kasi you cannot sell 533.33 units. Okay? So if this is a bicycle, paano yun? Okay, that's 533 bicycles and 2 wheels. Oh, parang ganun, di ba? 1/3 na bisikleta. Okay, so, ayun. Unless spare parts yan, baka pwede. So, what we do is we round it up to 534 units. Okay, so at 534 units, you may also want to compute for how much will be your sales. Kunyari, yun yung tinatanong. How much will be my sales so that I will have at least 10%? No? My net income will be 10% of my sales. So, ayun. At 534, you multiply that by 500, dapat ang sagot natin ay yung na-round up kanina. Ayun. Tama po ba? Ulitin nga natin. Bakit parang laki-laki? Papapahiya ako. 534 times. Ayun, 267. Kasi sa 266,500 or 267. Okay. Sales will be at least 267. Okay po, sana nasundan ninyo yon, no? Sige, screen capture, ulit-ulit, i-pause nyo muna, reviewin nyo before you go to the next section. Because the next section will ask you how many units are you going to sell if you want to have at least, kunyari maganda yung sulat ko, at least, no, a net income of at least 10% of sales. 10% of sales, but this one is after tax. Okay. Dapat may tax rate. Assuming our tax rate is, parang may narinig akong nagsabi ng 30% sa inyo. Okay. I-pause mo muna, saka mo siya isolve. Kunyari, sinolve mo na. Mas maganda sana kung face-to-face para nakikita ko yung mga mukha nyo na naaasar, para kapag mukhang hindi pa naaasar or hindi nahihirapan, pahirapan pa natin lalo. Doon kayo matututo Doon kayo masasanay. Net income after tax. I want a net income after tax, which is 10% of sales. Tcharan-chan! Oops! Makapagbigay nga ako ng assignment pala. Related dito. Okay po. Ayun. So, medyo madugo ito. Given our fixed cost, no, at 80,000. Paano natin yan i-consider? Next, our tax rate is 30% of what? This one. O di buuin na lang muna natin, di ba? Para makita natin ito. So, if this one is 130, this one will be 70%. So, if 10% is 70% of your net income before tax, anong gagawin natin dito? Okay, let's do this. 10 dead by 0.7. If I know, konti lang sa inyo ang nag-solve. Okay. Ano yan? 14.2857. Mas maganda sana pag hindi tayo mag-round off. Pero 29, sabihin mo ng 29%. Let's try to check na. 14.29% times 0.7 equals 10.3. Pwede rin 14.29 times 0.3 equals 4.287. Okay, so yan yung 4.287 or 4.29. May konting difference dahil nag-round off tayo dito Kung di tayo nag-round off, mas astig sana yan. But anyway, the difference of this is now 10%. So, solve na tayo dito. Now, all you have to do is to get this 14.29 minus 40. 40 pala. Minus 14.29 equals 25.71. 25.71%. So we are almost done. Your sales is equal to 80,000. Divide that by 25.71%. Tama. Taran! 8123 divided by 0.2571 equals 311,162.97. Okay, so mathematically, this will be your sales. Pero gaya nga ng sinabi ko kanina, if your selling price is 500, malabong mangyari ito. It's either 311 or 311.5, diba? And magra-round off tayo, malamang 311, 500. Yan, divide by 500, you will get the units na naka-round up. Pero let's just follow the process. So if this is now your expected sales, we divide this by the selling price per unit, which is 500 pesos per unit, and you will now get your quantity. Okay, so divide this by 622.33. 622.33, or you round it up to 623 units. So dapat ito, pag naka-round up, this will be 311,500. 623 times 500. Oh, pahiya ako. 623 times 500. 311,500 nga. Okay, so you should have at least sales, no? Sales of 311,500, or we should sell at least 623 units. So you will have a net income of at least 10% of your sales, and that is net income after tax of 30%. Okay po. So, ayun. Ano pa ba? Let's have an assignment. Okay, eto para makita ko kung sino sa inyo talaga ang gumagawa ng, hindi naman, ang nanonood ng video. May assignment tayo. Given the same information na sales at 250,000, variable cost at 150, and contribution margin, basta yung information natin kanina. Wala po akong babaguhin doon. Pero may tatanungin lang ako. You now have a net income of 20. Kahit nakalimutan mo na lahat yan eh. Okay. Basta balikan mo lang yung last few slides natin. Okay. The question is, I have 4 questions. Number 1. How much or how many units, parang ninenervyos ka, no? Do you have to sell so that you will have a net income of 10% of variable cost. Ganun lang. This one is before tax yan. Net income before tax. And then question number 2, it's the same. Okay. How many units do you have to sell if you want to have a net income, no? Net income of at least 10% of variable cost variable cost. Yan. But this one is net income after tax. Wait lang. Bakit ano? Baka malito kayo. Buuin ko na nga. Net income should be after tax inaantok na ba ako? After tax, mahirap ang walang kausap kasi, of 30%. Question number 3, ganun din, parehong-pareho. Ang question ay, how many units do you have to sell so that you will have at least a net income of 10%? Net income of at least 10% of, this time, contribution margin naman. Tapos yung net income natin ay before tax. Okay, and then number 4, same question, net income, same rate. Same with number 3, kaya ang basis niya contribution margin, pero this one is after, tayo makisama man lang nito, and after 30% of tax. Ayan, okay, gawin nyo yan, tapos isend nyo siya sa PM, sa email sa Canvas. Sekreto lang natin to, mga umabot dito. Ayan. Okay po. Bawal po sa Gmail, sa email lang po ng Canvas. Instructions. Very important. Okay? Pag nag-i-email kayo, merong subject line. Sa subject line, ilagay ninyo ang CVP secret ano may spelling ng assignment? Secret assignment. Okay po. That's it. And hindi pa tayo tapos. Kaya masyado nga lang mahaba. May 1 oras na, kaya TY na ako. No? TY na nga lang, wrong spelling pa. Kaya TTY na po ako. And I'll try to make a second part for this video. Okay po? And thank you.